Hi friends, today we're going to open up the memory chest and pull out some of the most iconic sweets of the 1980s. The ones that brought joy, evoked nostalgia, and provided a real sugar rush. We're talking about legendary treats that can no longer be found on American store shelves. These treats were more than just food. They were part of culture, part of childhood, a symbol of an era full of bright colors, bold advertising, and an endless stream of new ideas. Why did they disappear? Who is to blame? And most importantly, why are they still remembered with such warmth and an almost physical sensation of that very taste? Let's dive into the sweet nostalgia together. Get ready for a journey through time where every piece, every wrapper is a portal to the past. PB Max, these bars with cookies, chocolate, and thick peanut paste were a real treat for those who loved hearty sweets. They were positioned as energy in one bite and really did provide a feeling of fullness. Picture this, crunchy whole grain cookies covered in a thick, almost creamy layer of salty peanut paste, all drowned in milk chocolate. The flavor was deep, balanced. The saltiness of the peanut paste contrasted perfectly with the sweetness of the chocolate and cookies. It wasn't just a candy bar, but a complete mini dessert that could satisfy hunger between meals or be the perfect accompaniment to a glass of cold milk after school. The packaging, often done in Mars' characteristic red and gold colors, promised something special and nourishing. PB Max suddenly disappeared in the early 90s, which came as a shock to many fans. There were rumors that the reason was due to a personal dislike of peanut butter by Mars' then management. Just imagine, millions of dollars in profits, a huge army of fans, but the candy bar is taken out of production because of the taste preferences of one or more people at the helm. It seemed absurd and unfair. To this day, petitions are gathering on the internet, demanding the return of PB Max to the shelves. Fan communities discuss the possibility of recreating the recipe at home. The bar has become a symbol of how consumer taste and affection can lose out to corporate whims and strategic decisions that sometimes seem completely irrational. It is a reminder of a time when even giants like Mars could make decisions based not only on the cold logic of the market, but also on something more personal or immediate. PB Max is more than sweetness. It's a story about how flavor preferences can create the fates of products. Reggie Bar, a candy bar dedicated to baseball legend Reggie Jackson, nicknamed Mr. October, was a hit with sweet tooths and sports fans alike. It was a unique marketing move to link an athlete's popularity to a confection. The composition seemed perfect. Caramel, roasted nuts, most often peanuts, and milk chocolate. Outwardly, it resembled classic nougat caramel bars, but the nuts gave it a special texture and richness. It was not just a candy, but a cultural phenomenon associated with triumph, victory, and sporting excitement. In 1977, after Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs in the final game of the World Series, fans at Yankee Stadium literally threw thousands of these bars onto the field. It became one of the most memorable moments in American sports and advertising history. A candy bar in honor of an athlete quickly became a legend in its own right, going beyond a mere treat. Buying a Reggie bar felt like a part of a great moment, a small part of that victory. It sold with great success, especially during baseball season. But over time, like its sporting career, its popularity began to fade, and the bar gradually disappeared, leaving only memories, articles in sports archives, and fan posts on nostalgia forums. Why did he leave? Perhaps its fate was too closely tied to the career of Reggie Jackson himself. And after his departure from big sports, interest in the candy bar naturally declined. Or perhaps there was a change in licensing agreements. Even decades later, the Reggie Bar remains a vivid symbol of the flavor of victory and the unusual intersection of the world of sports and the confectionery industry. It's a reminder of a time when sweets could be more than just a treat, but part of a larger national story. Barnone. Barnone was a chocolate monster in the best sense of the word. Waffles, hazelnuts, cream filling, and thick chocolate coating created a dense, layered texture and rich flavor. Imagine several layers of crispy waffle layered with nut cream, studded with hazelnut pieces, and all this splendor generously covered in milk chocolate. It was rich with a nice crunchy texture from the wafers and nuts and a delicate creamy middle. This bar felt like an all-in-one, like eating an entire chocolate cake and dessert in one bite. It was quite weighty and satisfying. The marketing emphasized its layering and richness of flavor. Barnone quickly gained popularity among fans of rich, serious candy bars. However, in the early 1990s, the Hershey Company, which produced Barnone, decided to change the recipe by adding a layer of caramel and slightly altering the proportions of the other ingredients. The new version became more similar to many other caramel chocolate bars on the market, losing its individuality. This caused disappointment and a sharp drop in interest among loyal fans who loved the original version for its uniqueness. Sales plummeted, and eventually the bar was discontinued. To this day, the original version of Barnone evokes strong nostalgia for many who remember that particular flavor. Barnone is a classic example of how trying to improve the perfect can lead to its demise. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the best thing is to leave things as they are when the recipe is already perfect. Bonkers. Soft, chewy candies with fruit-filling Bonkers were something new and fresh in the 80s candy market. They were colorful, juicy, and a lot of fun. Each candy was a chewy bar with a liquid or very soft paste-like feeling inside. The flavor literally exploded in your mouth, especially when you bit into the candy and got to the fruit center. Different fruit flavors were presented: strawberry, grape, orange, and others, often in one package. The candies themselves were colorful, which added to their appeal. But what really made Bonkers iconic was their unforgettable television commercials. In these commercials, filmed in the style of a surreal comedy, people, often perfectly normal and sometimes crazy grandmothers, would go crazy over the taste of Bonkers, and their behavior would become completely unpredictable and hilarious. The advertising slogan, "Bonkers, Bonkers, Bonkers," was incredibly catchy. Bonkers were more than just candy, they were a show, a part of pop culture, a symbol of playfulness, and a slight madness characteristic of the 80s. Later attempts were made to bring the brand back to the market, for example, in the form of chewing gum, but they were no longer as successful. The original Bonkers. Gummies are remembered as candies with character that brought not only flavor, but also a smile. Their disappearance left a small void in the gummy candy market that other products were never able to fill, because Bonkers were unique in their combination of texture, flavor, and absolutely hilarious marketing. Jello 1, 2, 3. It wasn't just jelly, it was a true science experiment in the kitchen, accessible to every child and adult. Jello 1, 2, 3 was a powder mixture that, when cooked, adding hot and then cold water and then cooling, miraculously separated into 3 distinct layers: a thick jelly at the bottom, a light mousse in the middle, and an airy foam at the top. The cooking process was mesmerizing, especially for the children who watched the magic of layering. It was like a little miracle of chemistry in your kitchen. The dessert was often made for holidays, family dinners, or just to surprise guests. The flavor was light and refreshing, typical of Jello fruit jelly, but the layered texture made it much more interesting. Each bite offered a new sensation, from bouncy jelly to delicate foam. It seemed like a dessert from the future, futuristic and innovative. The packaging depicting the finished triple-layer dessert was very attractive. Jello 1, 2, 3 was a symbol of homemade creativity and dessert magic. The disappearance of 1, 2, 3 left a gap in the hearts of lovers of homemade wonders and unusual textures. Why did it stop being produced? Perhaps the preparation process, though magical, was less convenient than that of regular Jello, requiring a certain precision and time for each layer to solidify, although they were formed simultaneously. Perhaps the complexity of production or the declining interest in scientific desserts led to its demise. But for those who remember Jello 1 to 2, 3, it will always be remembered as a dessert that was almost as interesting to make as it was delicious to eat. It's a symbol of sweet home science and family moments in the kitchen. Oompas, these candies, named after famous Willy Wonka chocolate factory workers, resembled giant M&Ms but had a unique filling, a combination of chocolate and peanut butter. Unlike classic M&Ms with whole peanuts or just chocolate, Oompas offered a creamy, rich filling that was denser and more filling than regular Draggies. The flavor was bright, combining the sweetness of chocolate with the distinctive saltiness of peanut butter. They had a crunchy sugar coating like M&Ms, but the candies themselves were noticeably larger. Bright, cheerful packaging, often featuring images of Oompa Loompas, and a direct link to the magical world of Willy Wonka, created by Roald Dahl and popularized by the movies, made them even more appealing to children. It was fantasy embodied in the form of candy. They were associated with wonder, adventure, and the sweet exuberance of the Wonka factory. Oompas appeared for a relatively short time in the 1980s and disappeared as quickly as they appeared, leaving a sense of understatement and slight mystery. The exact reason for their disappearance is not widely known, but it's possible they couldn't compete with the established giants of the druggie market. Today, they are highly prized by collectors and devoted fans of the Wonka universe as a rare artifact from the past. Oompas are a reminder of how movies and literature can inspire unique sweets, and how some of these sweet incarnations of fantasy remain only a fleeting but vivid memory. 7UP Bar, not to be confused with the drink of the same name, this bar was a true sweet mosaic, a culinary adventure in every bite. Its uniqueness lay in its structure. It was one long bar divided into 7 sections, and each section had its own unique filling covered in milk chocolate. It was like a box of chocolates, only in bar format. Each segment offered a new, unexpected flavor and texture. It was a dessert for real gourmets and taste explorers, allowing you to try as many as 7 different confectionery compositions in one session. The packaging, resembling a map with different sections, added an element of mystery and anticipation. Despite the complexity of the production, requiring precise dosing of 7 different toppings and their careful separation, fans love 7UP Bar precisely for this variety and innovation. It was like a mini vacation through a chocolate factory. Unfortunately, the logistics, complexity of production, and possibly higher costs of making it took a toll on the public's love. 7UP Bar was discontinued, leaving behind the legend of the most diverse bar in history. Its disappearance is an example of how innovative and beloved products can fall victim to economic realities and production complexities. But the memory of the 7 wonders in one candy bar lives on to this day. Marathon Bar, a long, train-like bar shaped like an intertwined caramel braid under a layer of milk chocolate. The Marathon Bar was unique in its shape and texture. It stood out on the shelf among other bars, not only for its length, about 8 inches or 20 centimeters, but also for its unusual stretchy texture. It wasn't just caramel, but specifically a caramel braid that stretched with each bite. Its length and texture made it unique and memorable. It was impossible to eat it quickly. It literally stretched the pleasure and required patience. The Marathon Bar advertisement made heavy use of the theme of endurance and duration, alluding to the marathon distance, and it worked, creating a strong association with a long-lasting treat. It was perfect for those who wanted to savor the sweetness without rushing. Later, Marathon Bar had a counterpart from another manufacturer, Curly Whirly, which, by the way, still exists in many countries. But many fans claim that it was not the same. The original Hershey's Marathon Bar had a distinct flavor and texture that was different from Curly Whirly. Marathon Bar was the hero of the 80s, a symbol of long and pleasant enjoyment, and many believe that there was never a worthy replacement for it. Why did it disappear? Probably manufacturing difficulties due to the unique shape, or perhaps just marketing decisions by the company. Whatever the case, Marathon Bar has remained in memory as the longest and most dragging symbol of sweet pleasure of the 80s. Magic Middle Cookies, Keebler. Keebler's Magic Middle Cookies were culinary magic. They were crispy cookies with a surprise inside, a center of soft, melting chocolate or vanilla cream. Each bite was a little discovery, an unexpected treat. Outwardly, the cookies looked like ordinary shortbread or sugar cookies, but biting into them, you fell into the sweet, soft magic realm of the filling. It was especially delicious when the cookies were slightly warm, perhaps even heated in the microwave for a few seconds, which was a popular trick. Then the filling became quite liquid and stretchy. Magic Middles were often eaten with a glass of milk as an evening ritual or the perfect afternoon snack after school. The packaging, featuring the famous Keebler elves living inside an oak tree and baking magic cookies, made it even more cozy and appealing to kids. It was the perfect snack that felt special. The cookies came in several different toppings, but the chocolate one was probably the most popular. The disappearance of Magic Middles has left a void on store shelves and in the hearts of those who grew up enjoying this little magic. Attempts by other companies to create something similar failed, as Keebler had its own special skill. Magic Middle Cookies is a symbol of a simple but ingenious confectionery solution that brought joy through the element of surprise. Hubba Bubba Soda, bubblegum flavored soda? Yes, it really existed in the 80s, and it was incredible. Hubba Bubba Soda was bright, usually pink in color, heavily carbonated, and had the distinct sweet taste of Hubba Bubba strawberry bubblegum. It was a drink that was impossible to take seriously, and that was the beauty of it. It smelled like childhood, cotton candy, and looked like pure pink madness in a bottle or can. The flavor was shockingly similar to the gum itself, only in liquid form. It was very sweet and slightly sour, just like the famous gum. This drink was not mass-produced and sold in limited batches, often in small stores or in certain regions, so it quickly became rare and desirable. The introduction of Hubba Bubba soda was part of the 80s trend for bold and unusual flavor combinations, often based on already popular sweets. It is now remembered with both bewilderment, was there really such a thing? And adoration, that was genius. Hubba Bubba soda is the embodiment of the spirit of the 80s. Bright, bold, sometimes a little crazy, and absolutely unforgettable. It's a drink that proves that the lines between different product categories like gum and soda were much more blurred back then, and experimentation was highly valued. Tartan Tinies were small hard candies with a strong sour flavor and an unusual matte texture. They resembled tiny multicolored beads or pebbles and were very handy to carry in a pocket or small box. The flavor was bright, fruity, lemon, lime, orange, cherry, grape, but with a distinct sourness that made them different from the usual sugary candies. The sourness was strong enough to cleanse the receptors, but not as aggressive as some other sour candies. Children liked to sort them by color before eating them, make patterns out of them, or mix different colors to get new flavor combinations. There were even peculiar collectors who had an entire system of consuming Tartan Tinies depending on color and perceived taste. In the mid-90s, Wonka, who produced them, changed the recipe, making the candy softer, shinier, and less sour. This improved version lost the very unique matte texture and pungent sourness for which it was loved. Popularity plummeted and eventually the brand disappeared. The original Tartan Tinies, with their distinctive texture and bright sourness, are still enjoyed nostalgically by those who remember their flavor. They are a symbol of a small but memorable flavor adventure in your pocket. Dinosaur Eggs Bubblegum. It was a chewing gum and a toy at the same time, the realization of a child's dream of the 80s. Dinosaur Eggs Bubblegum was a large, egg-shaped sugar shell dragee with a piece of chewing gum inside and a small plastic dinosaur figurine in it. When the child started chewing, the sugar shell would crack open, revealing the egg and releasing the gum and the dinosaur hidden inside. For the kids of the series obsessed with dinosaurs thanks to movies and cartoons, it was a real wonder, a little archaeological discovery in each ball. The taste of the gum was typical for that time. Sweet, fruity, quickly losing flavor, but the process of hatching the dinosaur was unforgettable. The dinosaur inside itself was simple, often monochrome, but getting it was the main goal. The idea of hiding the toy inside the food was genius from a marketing standpoint. These eggs were often sold piece by piece in vending machines, which only added to their mystique and value. You never knew which dinosaur you'd get this time. It was an element of surprise and collecting. Today, finding such an egg is like digging up a real artifact from the past. Dinosaur Eggs Bubblegum is a prime example of how the confectionery industry in the 80s knew how to combine food, play, and the element of collecting, creating products that became not just a treat but part of playtime and children's treasures. Pudding Rollups. Do you remember fruit roll-ups? Thin sheets of chewy fruit pastilles that you could unwrap. Now imagine them in pudding flavor. Pudding roll-ups were a soft, stretchy dessert that looked unusual, but had a rich, creamy pudding flavor. It was an unconventional approach to a familiar school snack or dessert. Pudding roll-ups offered new flavors, familiar to pudding, but in a completely unfamiliar form. Despite rave reviews from those who tried it, the release was rather short-lived. Perhaps production proved more difficult or expensive than the fruit version. Or perhaps the pudding flavor in this format didn't find a wide enough audience for long-term success. It now lives only in the memories of those who have had a chance to try it. Pudding roll-ups is an example of bold experimentation with texture and flavor that, though short-lived, left a vivid mark on the memories of fans of unusual 80s sweets. It is a reminder that in that era, confectionery companies were willing to take bold steps. Space Dust. A predecessor to the famous Pop Rocks, this candy fizzed, crackled, and tickled the tongue, creating the sensation of a small explosion in the mouth. The concept was originally associated with space and weightlessness, and the advertising actively played on the wave of interest in space themes in the Star Wars saga. Space dust was a fine-grained, light powder with a bright sour or fruity flavor and, of course, the very explosive effect, which was achieved due to carbon dioxide contained in the sugar matrix. On contact with saliva, the sugar dissolved, releasing the gas. This product was even temporarily banned in the early 80s because of unfounded rumors about its harm. For example, stories that mixing it with soda can lead to an explosion of the stomach, which only added to its aura of mystery and made it even more desirable among children who love everything forbidden. Children felt like little scientists conducting a safe experiment with food. Small bags or jars of space dust were compact, but gave a lot of emotions and fun. Whistle pops. These lollipops on a stick weren't just sweet, they were musical. They had a small whistle built into their design. It was an ingenious and slightly diabolical invention from a parent's point of view. The walk became twice as much fun. First you whistle, then you eat. The lollipop had a characteristic shape with a hole which, when properly positioned and exhaled, produced a rather loud and piercing whistle. Parents hated them for the noise, but children adored them precisely for this ability to create cacophony and attract attention. The whistle was noisy, annoying, and that's why it was perfect for children's games and fun. The flavor of the lollipop was typical fruity, sweet, with a slight sourness, but who paid attention to that when you had an edible musical instrument in your hands? They were sold in brightly colored wrappers with simple instructions on how to whistle properly. Whistle pops were a symbol of the active, rowdy, and slightly hooligan childhood of the 80s. It was a candy that encouraged interactivity and didn't obey quiet rules. Such candy with functionality is rare these days, and 80s whistle pops have become a true rarity even at auction. It's a sweet artifact reminiscent of a time when the main thing about toys and candy was fun, even if it was a little annoying to adults. Chocolite. Chocolite was a chocolate with a unique, airy texture. It literally melted on the tongue, dissolving like chocolate bubbles. It was the American equivalent of European porous chocolate, but with a special, inherent flavor and texture. The lightness of the bar made it very unusual. It felt like eating chocolate bubbles or clouds. The flavor was clean, rich, with a distinct milky note and a pleasant sweetness, but it didn't leave a heavy feeling. It was the perfect chocolate for those who wanted something chocolatey but light. It wasn't as dense and filling as regular bars, which made it a refreshing treat. The golden foil packaging was recognizable at first sight and made it look like something premium, even though it was affordable. Chocolite was produced by Nestlé. Other porous chocolate bars later appeared on the market, but many Chocolite fans believe that none of them could fully replicate the lightness, flavor, and melt-in-your-mouth feel of the original. The Chocolite brand has disappeared from the American market, becoming a legend to candy connoisseurs. It's an example of how one unique characteristic, in this case an airy texture, can make a product unforgettable and make people yearn for it for decades. Chocolite is a symbol of lightness and melting pleasure from the 80s. Dr. Pepper gum, chewing gum, with the flavor of the famous Dr. Pepper drink, was a bold and intriguing experiment, and it really managed to convey that very special, slightly spicy, grassy cherry flavor of Dr. Pepper that his fans love so much. The first seconds of chewing made you feel like you had just taken a sip of soda, and then the more familiar flavor of chewing gum was revealed. It was a limited edition that instantly became a hit among fans of the drink and lovers of unusual flavors. Even adults bought it out of curiosity or just for fun. The packaging, often done in Dr. Pepper's signature burgundy colors, made it instantly recognizable. It was the perfect pairing to a glass of Dr. Pepper or a way to enjoy your favorite flavor when soda wasn't available. Fruit Wrinkles. Fruit Wrinkles were soft, chewy snacks similar in shape and size to raisins, but with a bright, concentrated fruit flavor. They were like natural candy, juicy, rich, and perceived as a healthier alternative to traditional sweets. In appearance, they resembled raisins or small berries, were soft and slightly wrinkly, hence the name Wrinkles. Their texture was unique, not quite chewy like chewing gum, and not hard like candy, but fleshy and firm like dried fruit, but with a bright, artificially enhanced fruit flavor. Fruit Wrinkles came in fun packaging, often with images of popular cartoon characters of the time, which made them very appealing to children and easy prey for parents looking for a middle ground between healthy and tasty. Parents bought them as a healthy alternative to candy, believing that since they look like raisins, they had more benefits, even though they were essentially sugar with fruit flavorings and pectin. Kids love mixing flavors from the same packet: strawberry, grape, orange, cherry, creating their own fruit blends right in their mouths. They were convenient to take with them to school, on a walk, on a trip. A little box of fruit Wrinkles in your pocket or lunchbox was a guarantee of a sweet, fruity snack anytime. They disappeared quietly, without a loud goodbye, but left behind a small void in the market for children's healthy sweets. Nowadays, such a unique, meaty texture in sweets is quite rare, which makes fruit Wrinkles an even more memorable memory of the 80s flavors. They symbolize an attempt to combine the trend for healthy eating, or its imitation, with bright, child-appealing flavors and packaging. Dweebs, if you remember the small, hard, crunchy candy nerds, Dweebs were their older, or rather bigger brothers. They were the same type of candy, sweet and sour, covered in a thin sugar coating, but they were noticeably larger and, most importantly, softer. They didn't have the same tooth-crunching crunchiness as nerds. They were easier to bite into, and they were less sharp on the tongue. They had the same rich, bright, fruity flavor, often more concentrated than nerds, but without as much emphasis on crunch. They were sold in distinctive double boxes, divided into two parts, each containing a different flavor candy. Dweebs were somewhat in the shadow of the more popular nerds, which were a true phenomenon of their time with their aggressive marketing and unique texture. However, Dweebs had their own army of loyal fans who preferred their softer texture and, in the opinion of some, more intense flavor. They felt more grown up, or just another option for those who were tired of the constant crunch of nerds but loved their sour fruit punch. The Dweebs offered the same riot of flavor but in a quieter format. Like many other less mainstream 80s sweets, Dweebs gradually disappeared from the shelves, becoming almost a myth to a new generation. Some collectors still seek out sealed boxes of Dweebs at auctions in hopes of experiencing that same flavor and texture again. Dweebs are a reminder that even the most popular products can have interesting, albeit lesser-known variations that leave a deep mark on the memories of those who love them. They symbolize diversity and willingness to experiment even within one successful format of sweets. What was your favorite candy, gum, or cookie from the 80s that you can't find anymore? What evokes the strongest nostalgic feelings for you? Write about it in the comments. Let's remember together more sweet legends of that amazing era. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more delicious, interesting, and nostalgic information to come, which will make you smile and maybe even tear up from your memories. See you again on our trip down memory lanes.